I am 72 years old, and there are 3 knives in my pocket right now.
2 of them I could not legally carry across 4 state lines. I did not become an outlaw. I did not change at all. The law moved around me while I stood still. My name is Burl.
I was born in 1954 in a county where every grown man had a knife on him and nobody thought a thing about it.
Not one thing. A man without a knife was a man who could not open a feed sack, could not cut a fishing line, could not whittle a peg to fix the gate. He was useless. That was the word they used. I want to be honest with you before we start, because I am not here to tell you the law is stupid. Some of these knives were made to hurt people. I know that. I'm not going to stand here and pretend a push dagger was a garden tool. It was not. But most of them were not. Most of them were something a man bought at the hardware store for $2, put in his pocket, and used every single day for 40 years to do ordinary work. And one day a man in the state capitol wrote a sentence, and that thing in his pocket became a crime. He never got a letter about it. Nobody came and told him.
He just kept carrying it the way he always had, and the ground shifted under him while he was standing on it.
So I want to walk you through 15 of them. 15 knives that a man in these mountains carried without a second thought, and what happened to each one. The first 12 are gone from my pockets. Some of them I gave up on purpose. Some of them I gave up because a lawyer told me to. And 3 of them are still on me right now, and I will tell you about those 3 at the end, because those are the ones that matter to me. Let us start at 15. Number 15, the switchblade. Now I have to be careful here, because this is the one everybody thinks they know about, and most of what people think they know is wrong.
A switchblade is a knife where the blade comes out by itself when you press a button. That is the whole definition.
There is nothing else to it. In 1950, when I was not even walking yet, you could buy one out of a catalog for $1.50. They came in the mail. They sat in a wire rack next to the register at the gas station, right beside the cigarette lighters. My Uncle Dewey had one that says Schrade on the side, and he used it to cut baler twine, which is the most boring possible use for a knife that everybody is afraid of. Here's why they existed, and it is not what you think. A man working with one hand full does not have a second hand to open a knife with. A man on a ladder, a man holding a rope, a man with a calf in his arm. That button was not for a fight. That button was for a man who only had one hand free. And then in 1958, when I was 4 years old, Congress passed a law called the Federal Switchblade Act, and it became illegal to sell them across state lines. 4 years old. I never got to choose. There had been a run of magazine stories and movies about street gangs, and the knife in the movies was always a switchblade, and that was that.
My Uncle Dewey kept using his own baler twine for another 20 years, and nobody ever bothered him, because nobody in that county cared.
But the factory stopped making them, the catalog stopped carrying them, and a whole kind of tool disappeared from American pockets because of how it looked in a movie. That is the pattern. Watch for it. It comes up again. Number 14, the gravity knife. This one is a paratrooper knife, and it works by letting the blade fall out under its own weight when you release a catch. Nothing springs. Gravity does the work, and that is where the name comes from. They were made for German paratroopers first, and then everybody made them, and after the war there were crates of them coming home in duffel bags, $2 at the Army surplus store. Every man I knew who had been overseas had one in a drawer. The reason a jumper needed it is a good one. If your parachute lines tangle when you land, you are being dragged across a field by your own canopy, and you have one hand free at most. You need a blade in that hand right now, not after you fumble with a nail nick.
The trouble came later, and it came from New York, and it is one of the ugliest things I know about in this whole business.
New York had a law against gravity knives, but the way police tested for it was to hold the knife and flick their wrist hard, and if the blade came out, that was a gravity knife. And here's the problem. If you flick almost any worn folding knife hard enough, the blade comes out. A carpenter's knife that has been opened 10,000 times gets loose. That is just wear. So for about 50 years, working men in New York City got arrested for carrying an ordinary pocket knife that happened to be old. Tens of thousands of arrests. Mostly delivery men, mostly carpenters, mostly men carrying a tool to a job. They finally repealed it in 2019. That is not ancient history. That is recent. Number 13. The butterfly knife.
The real name is balisong, and it comes from the Philippines, and it came home in the same duffel bags as the gravity knives.
It is two handles that swing around a blade, and it opens with a flip of the wrist. A man who is good with one can open it in about a quarter second, and a man who is not good with one cuts himself, which is most men, including me the first time. The reason soldiers brought them back is not glamorous. They were cheap. They were made by hand in a town called Balisong, and they fit in a pocket without a sheath. There was a boy in my class named Ronnie Combs, whose father came back from over there with two of them, and Ronnie brought one to school in the 8th grade and spent the whole of lunch period trying to teach 6 of us to flip it. By the end of that lunch, 3 of us were bleeding, and the teacher took it and put it in her desk drawer and gave it back to him at the end of the day, because that is what you did in 1968. You did not call anybody. You put it in a drawer. Most states now treat it as an automatic knife, same category as the switchblade, and it is gone. I have not held one in 30 years, and the last one I held was Ronnie's in a cafeteria with my thumb wrapped in a paper napkin. Number 12. The Italian stiletto. Long, thin, mother-of-pearl handle, and it looks exactly like the thing your grandmother was afraid of. These came off merchant ships. A man who worked the boats would bring back 3 or 4 from Italy and sell them for $4 apiece around the docks and the rail yards, and they moved inland from there. There was a hardware store in Hazard that had them under the glass. Now I will tell you the truth about this one. It was never a work knife.
The blade is too thin to pry with, too narrow to skin with, and the point breaks if you look at it wrong.
It was a knife you carried because it looked like something. And when the switchblade law came in 1958, the stiletto went with it because most of them had the button. The ones that did not have the button hung on a while longer, but the look was poisoned. A man with a stiletto in his pocket in 1965 was making a statement, and everybody knew what the statement was. Number 11. The double-edged dagger. 2 sharp sides, point in the middle, and this is the one where the law is honest. A knife with one edge and a flat back is a tool. You can put your thumb on the back and lean on it. You can baton it through a stick. You can use it to open a bag of chicken feed without cutting your hand. A knife with 2 edges cannot do any of that. There is nothing to put your thumb on.
It only does one thing, and the law noticed, and in most states a double-edged blade is a weapon per se.
Not a weapon depending on what you were doing with it. A weapon, period. My grandfather had one that came back from France in 1909. It hung on a nail in the smokehouse, and I never once saw him carry it. He knew what it was. I still have it. It hangs on a nail in my shop, and that is where it will stay. Number 10. The straight razor. Every man had one because every man shaved with one, and there was no other kind of shaving until the safety razor took over, and even then the old men kept the old way. Mine was my father's, and before that his father's, and it was a Wade and Butcher with a bone scale that had gone the color of wheat tea. Here is what happened to it. Nothing, legally, for a long time. And then cities started writing ordinances that listed weapons by name, and somebody put razor on the list. Because of a particular reputation, the razor picked up in the cities that had nothing to do with a man's face on a Sunday morning.
So now in a lot of towns, the thing your great-grandfather shaved with is a concealed weapon if it is in your pocket.
It is a strange thing to say out loud. The tool did not change. The tool is exactly the same tool. Number 9. The push dagger. A short blade with the handle at a right angle to it, so it sticks out between your fingers when you make a fist. I said at the beginning, I was not going to lie to you about these, so I will not lie about this one. This was not a work knife. Nobody ever peeled an apple with a push dagger. But I want you to understand who carried them and why, because it is not who you would guess. Coal miners carried them, railroad men carried them, and the reason is that a man walking home in the dark from a shift in 1930 with a pay envelope in his shirt in a county with one deputy for 400 square miles was on his own, completely on his own. There was no calling anybody. The push dagger was named by statute in a lot of states, and it is gone, and I am not going to argue with that one.
But I want the men who carried them remembered honestly. They were not gangsters. They were men walking home in the dark.
Number 8, the Bowie knife. Big fixed blade, guard on it, sheath on the belt. Every farm had one because every farm killed hogs, and a hog is a big animal, and a small knife does not do that job. You need length and you need weight. What killed the Bowie in a man's pocket is the simplest law of all, and it is the one that catches more honest people than any other: blade length. Most states drew a line somewhere between 3 and 4 inches. Above that, concealed carry of it is a crime, and a Bowie is 7 inches, 8 inches, 10 inches. There is no version of a Bowie knife that fits under a 4-inch rule. Now on your own farm it is legal, and cutting hogs it is legal, and hunting with it is legal. But the day you put it under your coat to walk to town, it became a different thing in the eyes of the law, and the man carrying it usually had no idea. Number 7, the boot knife. Small, flat, thin, and it rides in the top of your boot. This came over from Scotland and Ireland with the people who settled these mountains. There is a Highland knife called a Stygian dub that a man wore in his stocking, and when those families came to these hills, they brought the habit with them, the same way they brought the fiddle tunes and the way we say certain words. It is the most Appalachian knife on this whole list, and almost nobody knows that is where it came from.
And it is illegal in most places for one reason, not the blade, the hiding. Concealed carry statutes do not care what the knife is.
They care that you cannot see it, and a knife in a boot is the definition of a knife you cannot see. Number 6, the throwing knife. Now this one is going to sound made up, and it is not. There was a time when every county fair and every traveling carnival had a knife throwing booth, and the prize was a set of throwing knives. And men won them and took them home and threw them at a stump behind the barn on Sunday afternoons, the way men now watch a game. It was a whole hobby. There were clubs. There was a man in Perry County who could put 3 in a playing card at 15 feet, and he was famous for about 4 counties in every direction. My father won a set of 3 at the Clay County Fair in 1961, and they lived on top of the icebox for about a year. And then he nailed a cross-section of poplar to the fence post behind the barn, and that was the target.
You could hear it from the kitchen.
Yeah.
3 thuds and a pause while he walked out to pull 'em. 3 thuds and a pause.
He was not good at it. He never got good at it. He did it anyway for about 6 years, and then he stopped, and I do not know why he stopped, and now I cannot ask him. Some states wrote throwing knife into the statute by name, right next to the push dagger and the switchblade, and the hobby died. Not because anybody ever got hurt at the fair, because the words went into the book. Number 5, the Buck 110. 1964, folding hunter, brass bolsters, wood handle, and a blade that locks open with a click you can hear across a room. This is the most successful pocket knife in American history, and I want to be clear about what it did.
Before the 110, a folding knife could close on your hand. Every man who worked with one had cut himself that way.
The lock stopped that. Every boy in my school year wanted one. It cost around $11, which was real money, and you got it for graduation or for your first job, or you did not get it at all. I got mine in 1972 from a man named Steele Napier, who ran the hardware in town, and I did not buy it. I worked it off. He needed the back room cleared out, and I needed a buck knife, and we came to an arrangement where I would work 3 Saturdays and the knife would be mine. It took 4 Saturdays because I was slow and because that back room had 30 years of paint cans in it. He never said anything about the 4th Saturday. He just handed me the knife at the end of the day in the box with the tissue paper still in it. And I carried it for 11 years until I left it on the tailgate of a truck in a hayfield and drove off. And here is the part that gets people. In a fair number of places today, the lock is the problem. There are laws written against locking blades specifically, and the reasoning is that a locking knife is more like a fixed blade than a folder, so it should be treated like one.
So the exact feature that made the knife safe is the feature that makes it illegal. That is not me being clever.
That is what the statute says. Number 4, the electrician's knife. The TL-29. 2 blades, one a regular blade and one a flat screwdriver with a notch for stripping wire. The Army bought millions of them, and after the war, they were everywhere. $2. Every lineman, every electrician, every man who ever wired a barn had one. And a lot of men who never touched a wire had one too, because it was $2 and it did two things. Mine was my father's. He was not an electrician. He was a man who owned one screwdriver and it happened to fold. The legal trouble with it is stupid and small, and I almost left it off the list.
In some places, the screwdriver leg counts as a second blade, and there are ordinances that cap the number of blades. 2 blades, you are fine.
But because a screwdriver locks in some models, in a couple of jurisdictions, it reads as a locking multi-blade, and it trips a rule that was written for something else entirely. Nobody has ever been arrested for a TL-29, as far as I know, but by the letter of it in the right town on the wrong day, it is not clean, and I want you to see how far this goes. All right, that is 12. 12 knives that a man in these mountains carried, and every one of them is gone from my pocket. Some for good reason and some for no reason at all. Now I want to tell you about the 3 that are still on me right now, at 72 years old, sitting here talking to you. Number 3, the Case Sidebuster. $4 in 1975, 1 blade, no lock, a black plastic handle that they called Delrin and everybody called plastic. It is the plainest knife ever made. There is nothing on it.
No bolsters, no shield, no pattern name stamped in fancy letters.
Yeah.
It looks like what it is, which is a knife for a man who works.
I have carried one since I was 21 years old, not the same one. I am on my 4th. I lose them, and when I lose one, I go buy another one, and I have never once been sad about losing a sodbuster because that is not what it is for. It is a tool. You use it up. The blade is 3 3/4 inches, and I want you to notice that number because in 3 towns I know of, the line is 3 1/2. So the plainest, least threatening, most obviously honest knife in my pocket is over the line in those 3 places by 1/4 of an inch. 1/4 of an inch. Not because it is dangerous, because somebody had to pick a number and they picked that one. Number 2, the Barlow. This is the first knife almost every American boy ever owned, and if you are over 60, you know exactly what I am describing before I finish the sentence.
Long bolster, 2 blades, and the name Barlow stamped right there on the metal. Russell made 'em, Camillus made 'em, everybody made 'em.
$1. Sometimes it came free with a bag of feed. You got one when your father decided you were old enough, and the way he decided was he watched you for about a year without telling you he was watching. He watched how you handled a hammer. He watched whether you put a tool back. He watched whether you were the kind of boy who ran with something in his hand. And then one day he handed it to you and said one thing about it, and my father's one thing was, you cut toward the ground or you cut toward a scrap. Never toward yourself and never toward another person. That is the whole lesson. 11 words. I have never forgotten them, and I was 8. He did not show me how to open it. He did not show me how to sharpen it. He figured I would work that out, and I did, badly, for about 2 years.
What he gave me was the one rule that would keep me from bleeding, and then he let me be stupid about everything else.
I have thought about that a lot as I got older. He knew which part I could not afford to learn the hard way, and he only spent his words there. The Barlow is legal everywhere. Everywhere. 2 blades, no lock, under 3 inches, nothing to argue about. It is the cleanest knife on this list, and it is also the oldest design on this list, which tells you something about what happens when you make a thing simple and get it right the first time. Number 1, my father's knife. Camillus. Bought new in 1948, 6 years before I was born. He carried it every day from 1948 until he died in 1991. 43 years in the same right front pocket, and you can see it in the knife. The bolsters are worn down to where the brass shows through. The stamp on the blade is almost gone. There is a groove worn in the handle where his thumb sat. It went to my mother when he died, and she kept it in her drawer with his watch and his glasses, and she kept it there for 27 years, and she gave it to me in 2018, about 6 months before she went. She said he would want it in a pocket. So it is in a pocket. It is in mine every day, and it has been for 7 years now. And I want to say clearly that nothing about this knife is illegal. It is 2 3/4 inches.
No lock, nothing special. You could carry it into a courthouse in any state in this country and nobody would look up.
That is the point. The knife that means the most to me out of all 15 is the one nobody ever bothered to write a law about. It is not dangerous. It never was. It is a small folding knife that a working man used to open envelopes and cut string and slice an apple in the truck at lunch for 43 years. And here is what I have been circling this whole time. The men who carried the other 12 were the same kind of men. They were not different people. My Uncle Dewey with his switchblade and his baler twine was the same man as my father with his Camillus. Same county, same work, same church. One of them ended up on the wrong side of a sentence somebody wrote in a building he had never been to, in a city he had never seen, about a thing he had bought at the gas station. He never knew. He carried it until he died, cutting twine with it. Now I'm not telling you to break any.
I want to be very plain about that, because I am 72 and I do not need the trouble, and neither do you.
Look up what your state says. It takes 10 minutes and the sheriff's office will tell you straight if you call and ask nicely, and they would rather tell you than arrest you. But I do want you to know how it happened. It did not happen because working men got dangerous. It happened because pictures moved. A movie came out, a magazine ran a story, and a thing that had been in a man's pocket for 100 years became something to be afraid of, and the words followed the fear into the statute books. And the man in the pocket never got a vote on it. 3 of the 15 are on me right now. A sodbuster that is a 1/4 inch too long in 3 towns, a Barlow that is legal in all 50 states, and a 1948 Camillus with my father's thumb worn into the handle. That is what is left of 15. And the one I would fight to keep is the one nobody ever wanted to take. Tell me in the comments what is in your pocket right now and what state you are in. I am curious how much of this is just my county and how much of it is all of us. I read every one of them.